I get it, the title of this video is kind of ridiculous, but I'm being dead serious. I wouldn't waste your time if I didn't already know that this works. I've taught this exact process for the past 12 years with over 800 artists here at Cosmic. And now I just genuinely want to be able to help all of you make better music with less confusion. But first, we need to understand why so many producers struggle with mixing, making things sound balanced and clean. The good news is, it's rare that their struggles actually have to do with mixing. But the bad news is they still struggle with something else. They typically struggle with production. We're gonna go through some of the most important decisions you can make earlier in your process so they get you a better mix quality in the end. Let's first talk about a super important concept, and this is overall instrumentation. Think about it. When we mix, we're trying to fit all of our sounds into this finite amount of space. It's like a box that you have to dump all your shit into. Now, if you have 50 instruments to fit in this box, it's gonna be a lot harder than if you only had 10, 15, or 20. There's more available space when we have fewer instruments. You can make mixing a little bit easier if you do have this less is more approach during your production. However, easier said than done. Because if you're gonna use fewer sounds, they still need to provide value to the overall mix. How do we do it? Let's start by talking about something we put a huge emphasis on during our bootcamp working with the students, and that is shape of sound. You want to be spending a lot of time during the production stage addressing this, because ultimately your mix will be determined by the shape of your sounds. A clean, punchy mix has clean, punchy sounds, just like a long, muddy, weak mix has long, muddy, weak sounds. Let's look at this example that has a kick, a top loop, a bass, and a lead. As I flip, both will have the same sounds and writing. The only difference will be the shape of sound. On the first example, I just used the samples and presets as is, how they come. Where in the second example, I took the time to craft the shape of each sound so they complement each other in the mix. Let me show you what I mean here. So in the bass, I started with my ADSR envelope. Envelope 1 here allows me to control the shape when the filter is open, like this, where the second envelope is going to control the shape of my bass when the filter is closed. It's actually popping the filter open every single time a note is performed, and I could use this ADSR to control how fast it opens, how fast it closes, and you'll notice I can create multiple shapes in this one sound just by adjusting these envelopes. This same approach was then applied to my lead. Now I want to give you a practical example of how to do this in the mix because I think this is really important. I'm going to start with my main sounds, the ones that make up the core elements in my drop in this case. So watch this, as the kick and bass are playing, I'm going to adjust the lead's envelope purely by ear. I'm controlling the same parameters as before, but I'm not looking at numbers. They don't matter. I have no idea where this is going to fall, but I want to listen and let my ears tell me what values here sound best, what shape sounds best with the kick and bass. So that sounds pretty good. Now with the drums, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to play it in context with everything else, but in this case, it's audio. So what I'm going to do is use a plugin or a tool like a noise gate. And this is almost like an ADSR that I can use for my audio samples. I can set a threshold, and once my signal goes over it, we'll hear the sound. When the signal drops back below, it will mute the sound. Then with the other parameters, I could adjust how long it holds before the release phase. I can control that actual release, how long it takes the sound to fade away. It really is similar to the envelope on a synth. But again, I'm going to do this by ear and make decisions based on what sounds best, not what looks best. These production decisions make a huge impact in your mix, because think about what we just solved. Can you fix that during a mix? Not really. Imagine you printed all your instruments to stems, audio files, and ship it off to someone to mix the track. What's the engineer going to do if you're sending them the wrong sounds with terrible shapes, long and washed out? They're just polishing a turd at that point. They can't really fix the sound itself, but you can. And that leads us to the next thing we need to talk about, a production decision that's destroying your mix. This is the use of spatial effects. Think reverbs and delays. You might craft this nice sound, it's shaped real well, but then you overdo it. You put a ton of reverb or delay on it to make it larger than life. Think about presets, a lot of them come this way, but it's because we're always listening to them on their own. We're judging, is this a good or bad sound? So imagine you open up a preset and there's like no processing, it's just dry as a bone, a boring saw wave. You'd be like, the sound sucks, I'm not buying presets from this person anymore. So we need to use them, but understand it this way. The goal of this synth patch, let's say, is to sound good on its own. Yes, but we also need this synth patch to sound good with all the other surrounding elements in the mix. When you use reverb and delays, you want to check both of those boxes. You can't just say the reverb sounds great on this sound alone, but when you put it in the mix, it's drowning out all the other surrounding sounds. That example only checks the first box, but it doesn't check the second one. So let me show you some potential ways to solve this so you can use it correctly in your own production. Always start by analyzing your spatial effects on the most important layers first, the loudest layers in your mix. This might be like leads, vocals, mid-bass layers. Because they're so loud, they're always gonna get the most attention from a listener. So if you these up, it has a greater impact on the overall sound quality. Let's do an example with reverb, and I'm gonna do it in context of the whole mix. I'll start to increase the dry wet, which is just the amount of reverb we're gonna hear. Then I'm gonna increase the decay parameter, which is the length of the reverb. Now I'm always gonna go to an extreme amount so my ears can hear what is wrong first. Then I'll lower my decay in the opposite direction and make it too short so it sounds like shit. And from here, now I know I'm living somewhere between these 2 points. What I'm gonna listen for is a decay time that sounds good for the individual sound and complements the other surrounding elements in the mix, meaning it's not drowning them out, it's not overtaking them. Let's jump to the next part you need to be focused on, and that's how can you use sound selection to improve your mix? The key to proper sound selection goes against conventional thinking. You don't want to stack similar sounds on top of each other. You actually want them to be as different as possible. Think about it. If you want a really big something, and that something will be my hand. And you layer a bunch of those somethings on top of each other, because the characteristics, which are my fingers, are the same, you're not bringing anything new to the table. You're just blocking and masking what you already had. That's literally wasting space in the mix. They're eating up volume, but providing minimal value. So instead, imagine I had a sound with different characteristics, and I put them together. Now at least it's providing more audible value in the mix because it's filling areas that I didn't already have. So how can you use this concept of differences in the hands in your own productions? Start by choosing sounds with different timbral characteristics. For example, instead of layering this bass pluck with 3 similar layers, I can have 3 completely different timbres for the 3 layers and listen how much better it sounds now. This approach goes beyond synths too. You could use this with drums. If I'm gonna layer 2 toms on top of each other, it would serve me best to maybe have one layer be more clean and tonal and the other be more dirty and noisy sounding. Same for a hi-hat. Maybe the first layer is more clicky, short, metallic, and the second is more of a looser, noisy shaker sound. You've probably heard this phrase, every sound needs its own space in the mix. But most times when used, it's only talking about the frequency spectrum, the octave a sound might be sitting in. And that's technically correct. We want our sound spaced out across a bunch of different octaves, sitting in different frequencies, but there's more to it. We just saw the value of every sound having its own space from a sound design and timbral perspective, right? So we could squeeze even more value out of this by giving every sound its own space in the stereo field. Let's take this idea and I want you to listen carefully. Notice when I play it back, even though the sounds are different timbres, sitting in different octaves, they're all sitting in the same exact stereo space. Did Did you notice how all the sounds were very narrow, kind of like in the center of the mix? This just means they're all playing on top of each other. Look, it's gonna be on us to make our sounds fit in the stereo field. And unfortunately, there's no technical blueprint for this. I know the question gets asked a lot, where do I place my sounds? When it comes to production and mixing, you're always gonna be working on a unique puzzle, and you need to learn to embrace this. Your pieces that go into that song are always going to be different and unique, which means your way of putting them together is also always going to be slightly different and unique. It's why I can't give you the solution right here, but I can give you the process. We can learn what these important decisions are so we can use them for our specific case. So for this, I might keep my main drum elements down the center, kick, hat, clap, and then I'm gonna try and throw these 16th rolling hats out to the sides. Then for my instruments, I'm gonna keep my mid bass here and the lead down the center. Now, although they're both in the center, they are playing in different octaves, so they're separate in that way. And I could put some of my other secondary synth elements out wide to create that space. Now listen to the difference between the two. Notice how the mix sounded cleaner on the spaced out version. So much of your mix success is gonna come down to understanding how to choose the right sounds, how to shape the right sounds, and how to position those sounds in the stereo field. And you're in control of all of those things during the production. And if you're someone who wants to take this even further, like literally working one-on-one with me, with us here at Cosmic, I'm gonna put a pinned comment below. You can fill out an application.